Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religions. We have a return guest, Mark of Legend. Say hi to everybody, Mark. Tell them a little bit about yourself, because I think we already have more viewers than I'm used to having.
Yes. All right. Mark of Legend. I had it turned on over here. So I actually did a little bit of broadcasting on TikTok and Facebook. So hopefully I brought some friends, and Discord too. So hopefully I brought some friends over. My name is Mark, and I am under the assumption that many of the religious texts are actually handbooks to show us how to transcend our humanness and become more like God. And I believe that I'm one person that will be able to teach that to other people.
That's a great universal statement. All right. So, guys, this is part 2. So if you missed part 1, please go back and watch it. It's going to give some context to this conversation that you're going to be missing if you don't go and at least like skip through it every 5 minutes or something. Okay. So last we spoke, we were wrapping up by talking about receiving in prayer, and logic in my mind dictates that the next conversation should be information theory. So I asked Mark, not really challenged him, but asked Mark if he would have a defined way to express his thoughts and the way he looks at information. So I guess I'll ask you some direct question just to make it easy on you, just to get the ball rolling, so to speak. Okay, so I would say that in information theory, there's 3 kinds of information. There's raw data. There is Shannon information, which is not actual information, but only speaks to the complexity of data. And then there's information that translates ideas. Okay, so the kind of information that I'm actually asking you about is not raw data, is not Shannon information, but is only information that translates ideas. Okay. So would you speak a little bit what you found or what you defined in yourself, if you meditated on it or if you looked something up, or exactly what you did, if you did anything?
So it was actually twofold. There's that metaphysical, hard to exactly explain, intuitive experience I was having through dreams, through paranormal experiences, and through what I feel were messages from God. But then there was also just the hard work, the practical meditation and the study of the historic text, and me starting to link those things together. Is there anywhere you'd want me to move first, in that metaphysical aspect, or more in the analytical, practical, historical aspect?
Well, I think for our critical audience, and I tend to attract critical people, which I'm happy for. I don't want people who are easily swayed and next week they're listening to something else and they're on some other tangent. I don't want that. Yeah. I want hard thinking people who are difficult to convince them of anything. So if you would talk about application and practical exercise, or practical applications of information, what that means to you, and then we'll get into the metaphysical later.
Perfect. Okay, so the only part I have to add in the metaphysical part is that first feeling I had that the world was a maze or a puzzle to solve. It was an intuitive feeling, I thought. And so the first thing I did was I went to all the texts, right? I was a devout Christian. I believed that Jesus had died for my sins and all that. And as I got a little bit older, I realized I'm like, a lot of this isn't adding up. Why would they actually blood sacrifice someone in order to liberate me? I wasn't even born yet. So it just didn't make any sense. And I asked, the more questions I asked of my pastors and my family, the less convinced I was. So I broke away from that. I became kind of an atheist, but I quickly transitioned into agnosticism because I still felt there was a presence. And so I studied Buddhism, I studied alchemy, Islam, Hinduism, you name it, I was looking at it. And I got really stuck on alchemy and Hermeticism. So at first I was a young kid. So I'm like, turn lead into gold. I was thinking it was physical lead into physical gold. So I got very excited about that because I wanted to learn magic. Really, at the end of the day, I wanted magical powers, to be completely honest with you.
And who doesn't? I mean, exactly. I love some. That'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. And so I divided that into, partly selfish, turning a little bit of lead into gold for myself. And then obviously the rest selfless, helping the world transcend a lot of this nonsense. I was hypercritical of the way we run our society from economics to religion to politics to society, like to social issues. And so I wanted to do a little bit of both. So as I started to study alchemy, I realized that the lead into gold was a metaphor. And so I studied more and I studied more. And I realized as I was doing these, like putting different kind of herbs into alcoholic tinctures and all this other stuff, and I was taking them at night, and I was thinking there was magical things happening. I started to realize what I was really creating was a placebo effect. But that placebo effect started to have profound results. And I started to have these dreams that began to be a little prophetic. And slowly, as I read more texts and I talked to more experts in alchemy, I realized they were talking about turning a lead mind into a gold mind. And so I started to extrapolate. Just like we didn't think that anybody could run the 4-minute mile. One guy does it, and weeks later, 10 people are doing it, 20 people are doing it, and then 4-minute mile can be done by a high school kid now. I thought to myself, what if the same thing can happen with the brain? What if we think we can't run a 1-minute mile in the brain, or whatever that equates to? And it's just a psychic limitation. And so I started to draw a couple comparisons. This is an interesting one, but I'm going to use it because it's really important. Telomerase is an enzyme, which when it's produced, it repairs the telomeres. And so, and the reason we age is because telomeres shorten and shorten and shorten until the DNA ends are not protected. They're like bumpers. And then you have DNA degradation, and then the cell doesn't reproduce, and i.e. aging. Secondly, we can produce stem cells into adulthood. And so right there, I thought to myself, well, that's the key to immortality. And so my question became, can we consciously make telomerase produce in the body? And there's a couple studies that show that when you meditate, you can maintain your telomeres longer and produce telomerase. And so it got my brain thinking even more. I'm like, okay, wait a second. What if I can consciously change the way my DNA expresses itself? And if I know there's jellyfish out there that can live forever by reversing their aging and doing this, that, and the third, and there's crabs that can produce an entire new shell in 3 days, and none of the scientists can possibly imagine how they're converting that much calcium into their body and creating the shell in 3 days. Now I'm really going deep into this. And so I don't want to lose anybody, but this is the train of thought. Epigenetics is a study that believes that essentially, we were talking about the 100th monkey theory the other day and things of that nature, that DNA might be a little more important than we even think it is now. And that all the junk DNA, it could be, right? All that junk DNA and all these different things. How is it possible that if we imagine DNA as a readable and writable book within ourselves, and if epigenetics is real at all, that the DNA can change over the course of your lifetime, is it possible for us to actively change and control it to the point that we start expressing biological traits based on what we select? Okay. And so I took it a step further and I studied, it was Phil Mickelson, a golfer. He was trying to practice on a swing that he couldn't get right on golf. Okay. He was practicing, and he couldn't get it right. And he was kind of getting frustrated about it. One night after giving up on practicing, he has a dream. And in the dream, he sees himself do the perfect swing. He gets up in the morning and he can immediately do it without practice.
Right.
And so now I'm looking back at the meditation stuff from Buddhism, meditation in Hinduism, alchemy even. And I'm starting to realize that what they're actually doing is thinking themselves into higher states of being. And if we know anything about human beings, we should never put a hard limit mentally or physically on ourselves. And so my theory became, my foundational theory is, I can think myself into anything. And so I hit this sort of biological limit. Well, I can't turn into a dragon or something. You know, I tried to think of the hard limit of what I could do with my own DNA over time by thinking it into a new regulation because of epigenetics and because of what I study with meditation. But then I started getting into simulation theory, right? And funny enough, we're talking about information.
I'm gonna need a definition on simulation theory.
So essentially that this is a simulated universe coming from a higher dimensional universe. Like this isn't the substantial reality. This entire reality is being projected out of another place you might call a higher place. Some might have called the heavens. The Kabbalists might have talked about those 10 layers of reality. And so that possibly, if we are not only here, but we are existing outside of the simulation, for instance, just like we would change an avatar in a video game, we may be able to tap into our higher selves and change what we are completely here. So what I was trying to do was find a sensible way to work out, if Jesus turned water to wine and Buddha was able to meditate in the air, if so, then how, right? And those were the two leading theories I came up to, was that maybe we can consciously up and down regulate DNA to the point where we can live 700 years, like they talk about in the Bible, right? Maybe we can understand that we are actually in a video game, for instance. And just as you can realize you're in a dream and begin to do whatever you want, you can fly, you can turn one thing into another. This is that magic we're talking about. What if the dream state we're in sleep isn't, when we wake up, it's not the substantial reality? What if we're still in a dream? And the Buddha and the Christ and all these individuals were actually just waking up from the dream without going back to that reality. But for instance, they talk about Christ when he is reborn, he has to leave after a period of time, almost as if a clock ticks afterwards. And I wonder if it's a signal to say he realized he was in a dream now. And as a result, once you realize you're a dream, the dream has to end relatively quickly, because you're laying on your bed and you can't help but to think about it a little bit. So eventually you'll be pulled up into that substantial reality. I know that's a lot, but that's sort of where my mind went with all this.
Well, I think I'm learning that as we talk, the more we talk, the more we're going to have to talk, because to me, there was about 5 different topics there.
Yeah.
And I'd love to break down each one of them individually. But for now, okay. So if you feel like that's covered practical application and metaphysics of information on a fundamental level, and you're happy with what you've said.
Yeah, I know I probably went a little tangential and talked about a lot of different big ideas, a lot of new information, but
it's hard to not. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. But that's my train of thought, is how I could practically justify, at the very least, skeptics looking into epigenetics, simulation theory, up and down regulation of DNA through meditation. These are good places to start if you are a skeptic and you don't want to read the holy books, but you want science to back it. Those are some pretty compelling arguments they're making on that side.
On the placebo effect, I would ask why there is testing against the placebo effect in pharmaceutical trials.
Testing against as if they've proven it wrong?
No. In every pharmaceuticals trial, you have to have a placebo group.
Yeah.
It's required.
Yeah.
Because the placebo effect is real.
Yes.
But
exactly.
they never ask the question, why does it work?
Exactly.
Which you have asked yourself, and good for you.
Yeah. So you go ahead.
No, you.
So, and that's something I really wanted to dig to the bottom of, because if there is actually a placebo effect, which means I can think myself into a different it's easy to think yourself into a different psychological state, obviously.
Sure.
But then you have to ask yourself, how far can that go? Can I regulate the serotonin in my brain just by thinking about it? Just by thinking, I know I have control over this process. Let me pump a little more serotonin, right? We don't know. But physiological changes, that's a hard one to obviously pull off if we don't think that the mind-body is connected, which you and I probably do. Most people see the mind as a separate entity that is ineffectual to the physiological body. They see the body as sort of a thing that you place the brain into. There's a lot of materialist thinkers that think this way, right?
I'll tell you a little story. Something happened to me when I was 13 years old. I have my next eldest brother is a certified genius. He's also a little bit of a social maladapt. Okay, I guess that's part of the deal.
Tends to happen. Yeah,
tends to happen. But he is someone who really enjoyed reading his whole life. And I walked into the room one day while he was reading. I was about 13 years old, and I had the hiccups, and it was annoying him. So he asked me, "What am I doing?" And I said, sarcastically, but literally, "I'm hiccuping." And he said, "What's a hiccup?" And Mom was a medical professional. I said, "Well, it's a convulsion of the diaphragm." And he says, and what's in charge of your diaphragm? I said, "My brain." And he said, "Who's in charge of your brain?" I said, "Me." And he said, "Why are you hiccuping?"
Whoa. Wow. How old was he when he said that?
He was 16. I was 13.
Good Lord. Yeah, he is a smarty pants, huh?
Yeah, really. So I haven't had a case of the hiccups since I was 13. I haven't.
Amazing. Wow.
Just as a for instance.
Yeah.
Your brain is very much in charge of your body, no matter what you think.
Yeah, and think about what he did. The first thing he did was attach you directly to the physiological experience you were having, and then he directed it back up to the place in the brain, right, that has some sort of switch for it. It's almost like he walked you through that new pathway in your brain.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when I used to drink, if I would drink a lot, I would hiccup once or twice before I could stop it.
Wow. That's really awesome, actually.
I'm just hoping it never catches up with me and I have a year-long hiccup session.
Yeah. Or you think yourself out of your own power, and then like you just lose control of the special ability.
That's really not going to happen. Trust me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the placebo effect and how much of that is controllable. I find in my own experience that there are actual physical manifestations and benefits to my person because of my attitude, not just my mental attitude and how good I feel about me, but also how my body reacts to how I feel about me. Yes. And there can even be direct control over my body itself, because I'm aware that I can, like you're saying. And I would give one example of that. I only eat once a day, though I see people eating 3 times a day.
Yeah.
All right. But I don't get hungry seeing food. So I have unpavlovian dogged myself.
Yep.
And I eat when my body needs to, and what's convenient for me is once a day. So there's a tiny, tiny example. I would give a larger example of something that has no medical precedent, but I can medically verify. My brother was 16. I was 13. Yes, since I was 13, I have not had a case of the hiccups. You can ask anyone that knows me. I have very good circulation in my feet now, and that's another story because historically I have bad circulation in my feet. But I like to stand on cold concrete because my feet are always so warm. And I can't walk without some kind of shoe. Like you can't walk on your hands all the times without some kind of glove. You know, you need your skin's just not that tough.
Yeah.
So I wear sandals and I like to shed them and stand on cool concrete. And this past winter, my feet were hot. I was having a cigarette. I was outdoors. No, I don't live a healthy life. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I take off my sandals and I stood on the concrete, enjoying the coolness and the crispness of it. And I noticed the arch of my foot was not cold, which my whole life I've been flat-footed. I can show you medically from military records, I'm flat-footed. I can show you that. I don't know any way to correct flat feet. But I noticed my arch was not cold as it should have been. I pick up my foot and I've got a normal sweat human footprint I've never had my whole life. That happened. Wow. I was 51 years old. That happened.
That's amazing.
Okay? And it's nothing that I did. I didn't do exercises. I didn't take medication. I didn't get surgery. I didn't anything. Nothing at all. Okay. Yeah,
and I agree. And like conversely with your story about only having to eat once, I've had people in my life where they're like, if they miss their, I was just talking to a friend about this. If they miss their meal at 12 for lunch, by an hour later, they're hangry, they're melting down, they think they're having a blood sugar attack. And I'm trying to explain to them, it says, you're fine. You've tricked yourself into thinking, you know what I mean? And everyone will say, oh, everyone's body works different, da, da, da. Yeah, but there's a lot of general constitutions that all human beings, yeah. Like, and I go 3 days sometimes, no food whatsoever. Sure. And then I'll jump back on food, but I'll do a fast like that. And everyone's looking at me terrified. They're trying to get me to eat food. It's like, I've done
You're
this.
going to die, Mark. You're going
Yeah.
to die.
Exactly. I
No.
said, I've done this 100 times. And on the third day, I feel better than I did before when I was eating, probably because I'm eating too many foods that I'm slightly allergic to. So, but they would miss a couple hours. And I'm looking at them like, you guys saw me do this. You saw me do it for 3 days, and you're 3 hours late and you think you're going to die. You're right. It's mostly in your head.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Mr. Paul Kamish, who I have some respect for, is an intelligent person who wrote, a hiccup is an involuntary response. Now, I'm reading that because it's not a very long and well-defined statement, but I'm reading that as Paul Kamish understands from science and biology that a human being cannot control their hiccups. I'm telling you right now, Paul, you cannot control your hiccups because what you believe.
Yeah.
So you're right about you, and it's all in your head.
Yeah, and we talk about things like the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, right? Or those processes that we're allowed that we take over on a regular basis, like moving my hands, right? Breathing is involuntary, but when we think about it, right, we can take a voluntary control over it.
Sure.
When did that happen? Because it had to have occurred at some point in evolution. Let's say, if we're arguing that there's a regular evolution from us to animals that didn't have any voluntary breathing, there had to be a point where there was a new network in our brain that took on that role when need be. Like if we were preparing to go exercise, right? Probably happened in some nomadic tribe time where we knew that we had to maybe oxygenate our blood more right before we sprinted after an animal. Let's argue that's when it happened. If there was a time in human history where the brain got hardwired to do that, right? Possibly by us, our own intellect doing it, is it possible that we can take on voluntary control over involuntary actions right now? There's actual medical science that proves that if you meditate a lot, you will begin to have sensations and connections to your parasympathetic that come from your mind, and actually be able to actively take control over parasympathetic. When I say parasympathetic, it's the things that you don't really have any control over. You can start to take control of those systems. You can calm your heartbeat down. You can lower your heartbeat through calming your mind, not just breathing techniques, mentally focusing on those things. You can bring your brain into different brainwave levels just by thinking about it. You can bring yourself into delta wave just by thinking of being calm. It's not just the breathing that's involved there, I think.
Mr. Kamish, I'm going to be a little bit insistent about this. I hope I'm not trying to be offensive. Warm water and cold water don't have any effect on hiccups scientifically. The reason that you think that the reason that warm water helps is because you think warm water helps. That's the only reason it helps. Some people can drink milk, same effect. Some people can drink upside down, putting their chin in the cup, and that will work because they think it'll work.
Or scaring somebody, right?
Anything that you think will work, which means it's all in your head. That's why it's different, no matter who you ask. Because they're all inventing it based on social structures that don't exist.
And what does Christ have to say about having faith the size of a mustard seed? If you truly believe, maybe we put a hard limit on what exactly a human being or a human body can do, but if you truly believe, something changes in you. The 4-minute mile is a perfect example. They were having the same conversation back then. It's humanly impossible. It can't be done. The body cannot do it. The best scientists were claiming this. This guy was like, no, screw that. I'm going to go do it. And he did. And we realized it was a mental limitation. At the very least, we have to ask ourselves a question. How many of the things we believe we're limited physiologically are actually just limited mentally? Because we saw it happen then. There could be hundreds, if not millions, of things about our human body that can actually be rewired with the brain.
Right on. Right on. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the rewiring process.
Yeah.
And my experience and what your experience has been and how we perceive our individual experiences. Okay?
Excellent.
Okay. And I would start that out. I did not want my flat feet fixed. I never thought about whether or not my flat feet could be fixed. And I was okay just not stepping on uneven surfaces and being careful how I walk and where I walk. I was okay with that. I thought, because I hadn't thought about it, I just accepted that it was a lifelong situation that could not, would not, should not be corrected for any reason. Okay.
Yeah.
So when that happened to me without me considering it, I have to think either A, I got healthier, or B, something took advantage of those processes that I have to self-heal, unaware. To me, unaware. I was not aware it was going on.
Yeah.
All right. And what do you think of that?
So yeah, that's a doozy, right? Because you're not taking any sort of active mental control. But I guess here's what I think. Well, here's what we know. The human brain is the most complex piece of matter in the known universe that we know. And in fact, scientists are looking now and at what's called our magnitude scale, which is sort of like the size of the earth down to the size of the human. The ecosystem on the planet and our brain and our head, even if you look out all the way down to the subatomic into the galaxy's universe itself, we are still, that brain is still way more complex a system than many of these other systems are. We know that it would take an entire block of a supercomputer to match the processing power of the brain. So you have to ask yourself two questions. One, like I said, what can we consciously do with that brain? But two, how much stuff is going on in our brain that we have no clue? Like the processing power is unimaginable. And so for instance, you might have just had a thought one day when you were a kid and you were like, you know what, I wish I didn't have flat feet, and then left it alone. That thought bounced around in your head, but the algorithm of that thought couldn't be completed by the brain because the brain was too busy with too many other things. And the brain did not convince itself that amazing things could happen in your life to change your physiology. But maybe as you started to develop these understandings, you're building all these new pathways. Eventually, you have a million desires and wishes you've made over the years that are listed in the back of the brain. The brain has categorized them specifically as things Richard wants. And it just happened to get to that one because you just wished one time. I'm sure you would had a desire at one point to be like, I wish I didn't have flat feet, or I wish I had more of an arch. It could have just been a really quick thought passing. The subconscious brains finally got to that one and said, okay, let's give Richard that one. And I think that would be how I explain it. Nothing is ever lost there.
Actually, it was a lifelong problem that I was reminded of a constant basis, because for one thing, if I stepped on something with my left foot, if I stepped on something with just the ball of my foot, I would have a bone pop out the bottom of my foot.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, I was really flat-footed, like no joke.
Yeah.
Like flat. Okay. Yeah. So step on something uneven, suffer a good bit of pain and a little bit of shock, and then step on something again to shove it back in where it belongs and reset the bone.
Jesus.
And that was something I did which is it'll about make you vomit. It's not nice.
Yeah. or pass out while you're trying to do it.
Yeah, it's not cool. It's almost a shot to the testicles. It's about the equivalent of that. Not quite the equivalent of that, but it's in that neighborhood. But anyway. Okay. So I would ask you to expound on some of your experience. As information is as we know it. And first, I guess I should ask you to agree or disagree with a certain statement, and that is this: that information in the way of transmittal of ideas, information, its source is always a conscious mind. Do you have any problem with that statement?
No, because whether or not the conscious mind is outputting the information or inputting, if it's outputting, obviously. But if we receive information from the universe or whatever, that's information that we have categorized as such. It takes a human mind to even imagine the idea of information, because that in and of itself is a linguistic construct representative of ideas we've categorized. So yeah, either way, it takes
Okay. All right. And that's why when I define information, I mean a transmittal of ideas using a known code, an agreed upon code between two conscious minds.
Yeah. Because you have to collate the data and then categorize it.
Yes.
In which it
by necessity, it has to do that thing.
Yeah.
I've heard of an oversimplified example, but I've been told many times that I speak in too big of terms and I don't break things down enough. So although I think this is oversimplification, perhaps I should say it anyway. If I listen to the radio is producing no information. Neither is the antenna, neither is the radio station, neither is the CD that's playing at the radio station, neither is the DJ, neither is the shipping process for the CD to get to the DJ, but neither is the recorder of the song. But only the artists producing the song are making information.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
All the rest is transfer and in translation. Yep.
Transfer and translation. Now we can show what information is and the necessities of information. And we can show how to translate information through physical media, whether that's a binary zeros and ones in a series, right?
Yeah.
Or whether it's written word on page, or whether it's spoken word carried by airwaves.
Yeah.
Either way, or electronics that we're using now. Either way, it's two conscious mind translating ideas with each other. That's what it is. Okay. All right. So, have you ever received in any way, non-audibly, without reading, without using Braille, information that was valid in reality? That is, it was applicable in life.
Absolutely. Every single day of the week, every time I fold my hands and pray.
I know. Could you give a compelling example of, because look, man, I'm trying to encourage other people to develop this in themselves.
Yeah.
This is not a special ability. This is something humans do.
Yeah.
And if you really critically think about how you're doing it, if you receive information from outside of your experience that is applicable, falsifiable in reality, and is true, you can't invent that.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not an invention of your imagination. It doesn't work that way.
Exactly.
So would you give a compelling example? And I would too when you're done.
Yeah. So one example, a couple examples occur directly from dreams. There's this one like entity or whatever you want to call it that comes, never shows its face. It's always kind of like behind me, but it always gives me a couple tips for time to come. Like not what's happening right now, what's going to happen in the future. So this is the weirdest one. It's kind of the funniest one too. And it's the reason I really started getting into alchemy. I'm just sitting, I'm not sure where I am. I'm probably out in the field or something. And I'm sitting down in a chair and I could feel someone come around my shoulder and they bring a book in front of my face. And it's got a guy who looks like he's sort of walking a dinosaur. And all he says is, humans and dinosaurs existed at the same time. And then the dream was over. So the next day, I forgot about the dream when I got up in the morning, but I'm looking at some different texts and I fall upon this one called the Book of Aquarius, which is a book of alchemy. So I'm reading through the introduction and the guy says, okay, before we start, I need to show you guys a couple things so you can understand that we live in history was manufactured. They changed history around. One of the first things he said was, okay, dinosaurs and people were lived at the same time. And then I was shown the exact same picture I was shown in the dream the night before. And so for me, that was immediately a sign that I needed to read the book. Another one that happened very recently, I hope he's actually watching now. He goes by Monument on the Discord. His name is Jay. He's a great guy. And the other day, I had this, I heard like the voice, right? And it was like, get with Jay.
I bet you didn't know this.
My man, right there.
He just showed up as you spoke him.
Isn't that strange? Which is actually part of the story for what happened with the two. I'm just telling the story today, right now at Monument, about the strange connection we've been having lately. Yeah, we are living with dinosaurs now. Seriously, especially the Komodo dragon. So I was thinking the other day, I'm like, I got this voice. It was like, talk to Monument. It's time for him to learn about this new thing in the school that we're teaching. And so I reached out and I would meet as like, hey man, look. And I also like talked to him about shadow work. That was kind of the message I got. And I was feeling it for about 24 hours before I'm like, I got to talk to him. So I reach out and I'm like, hey, this is thing one and thing two. Like, I really want you to start working with the shadow work, and I want to talk to you about this new level of the teaching. And he goes, that is so weird. You've been on my mind for like 2 days now. I wanted to reach out to you about the shadow work, and I wanted to reach out to you about this other thing too. And it happened almost like at the same exact time. So that's a nice little recent example. It's just these little whispers, or they'll be like, hey, this person's having a really hard day, reach out to them. And I already know that they're going through something specific, but it's always the right person, and the other person on the other side is like, holy crap.
Yeah, a friend of mine and I are having this same conversation in public, and he pauses the conversation to say, "Man, I'd really like a coffee." Okay.
Yeah.
About 15 seconds later, where the physical pacing would have put this person out of earshot, a man walks by, turns around, and comes back and says, "Here, would you like a coffee? They made my order wrong. This one was free."
Wow.
But I would say the man ordered the coffee at least 5 minutes before that.
Yep.
And the Starbucks worker messed up the first try at least 4 minutes before that, before my friend said, I would really like, and the man was not in view of my friend when he said, I would like a cup of coffee.
Exactly.
So what order did these things really go in? Did my friend make the cup of coffee? No, he hadn't even had the thought yet. Well, but someone was already bringing one as he said it.
Yeah, and so that brings into question two things. Do these messages transcend linear time? Right? So that's the one thing on one end. And secondly, are we all sort of Wi-Fi connected? Right? And so that person has the coffee messed up. It's like, I can't drink this. Because you guys are in local space with them, right? The whole network, whatever you want to call it, God, of course, right? Like the whole network of human consciousness that's connected to that, a message goes out, right? And that one person's like, oh, I have a desire for coffee, and it goes to them on the subconscious level. Like, what if we're all communicating all the time, almost like Wi-Fi connected between each other?
Well, it certainly wasn't a one-way sidewalk, and he had to come that direction.
Exactly, yeah.
That man could have turned any way that he wanted. This is a tourist town. Tourists will randomly select places to go to, things they would like to see in some kind of random order, apparently, or observably random.
Yeah.
But not necessarily always random, which makes me laugh.
Yeah, and like another thing is, like, how many people in the audience right now, you feel like, oh my gosh, I got to call this person, or you think about this person, they call a second later, or they message you a second later. How many times does this happen, and how many times have you brushed it off as coincidence? Sure, there's coincidences, but a lot of good science that lays the foundations for what we believe today started out as someone seeing a coincidence, right? The apple falling from the tree and hitting the ground was a coincidence the first time it happened. A conscious, like thinking person saw it one time. The second time, it's a trend. The third time, it might be a law. And so you have to start thinking about it this way. It's like we're so pushed away. We're so pressured to not look like a fool and imagine that there's actually something that may be happening here, and that we may be sort of Wi-Fi connected to each other, right? Or there may be an actual deeper, more cosmic, intelligent voice that connects to us. People are so terrified.
We are very afraid of looking like fools.
Yeah,
we are very afraid of looking, and it keeps us from finding out what the truth is around us. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the fallacy of the false equivocation. Okay, where people say you have a false equivocation because you're neglecting the misses and counting only the hits. which they're false about, and we all
absolutely.
know it.
Yeah,
They're absolutely wrong about that, and we all know it. Now, it doesn't happen the same way as it used to when all telephones were electrically connected with wires, but it's still observable today. It's just not as profound. It's not as interesting to me personally, I think, that you could have, as you said, the thought of someone. They are not scheduled to call you in any way. Perhaps you haven't had a thought about this human being in 3 or 4 years, but because people lived in the same place and kept the same phone number forever, they would call. When I was a child, my youngest sister and my next eldest sister had a very strong connection this way. And my youngest sister still living in the house, my next eldest sister having moved out and gone to college, my baby sister could say, so-and-so's about to call, and it wasn't scheduled. And it wasn't at a certain time of the day or on a certain day of the week. It just wasn't. But she'd walk over to where mom was and say, Mom, Sue's going to call. Mom would already had confidence in it. After the 1,000th time that it happened, she'd start walking to the phone. She'd be about reaching for it. It would ring. She'd pick it up and say, hi, Sue. And they never missed, not once.
Wow.
Okay.
That's so insane.
But that's the problem. We look at it socially and we say, oh, that's crazy. It's not. People experience these things all the time.
You're right.
Mark, I mean, I know you didn't mean it. And you said that casually because it is profound and interesting. Yeah. It is cool.
Yeah.
You know, I know you didn't mean that's weird or amazing or unusual or freaky. Actually, it happens all the time, and we just blow it off because of the false correlation.
Well, yeah, and if you look at how much money the CIA spent on remote viewing.
Actually, in 18 years, $20 million.
It's insane. And the results, the
results were 68% success rate. Aspirin only enjoys a 35% success rate in helping heart attack victims.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's twice as good as aspirin.
Yeah. And I was watching one of these TED Talks with, they're called the banned TED Talks. They're not banned, but they're hard to get, I guess. And this guy explained his years and years and having incredible success with people that were not trained beforehand. He trains them, and they're knocking it out of the park. I mean, I've done it myself.
Is he somewhere close to his 70s in this film footage? Has very thick glasses, tall, skinny guy with curly hair. That's Russell Targ.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And it's compelling. It's compelling for anybody, even a skeptic. You got to look at that and say, that's a lot of money to just waste for no reason. He's like, how did I go 20 years working with the CIA and pulling off a magic trick? We're talking about the CIA and the military. You think you're going to pull off David Blaine magic tricks with them for 20 years? Absolutely unlikely.
You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it for one day.
Exactly.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
They do not like wasting money.
No, not at all.
Because they'd rather put it into something productive that's going to cause them to have the greatest army on the planet. That's what they want.
Precisely.
And they're serious about it. I promise you, they're very serious about it.
Yeah, they're not going to blow money ever. I mean, like, obviously, America being the country that absolutely has to spend more money than any other country, for obvious reasons, got a lot of targets on its back. It's the leader of the free world, quote unquote. You've got to be very scrupulous with your money, obviously. Even when you hear about all those trillions of dollars that disappeared under the Bush administration, but they disappeared to black projects. You just don't know about them. They're not going to tell you. It's not like they just lost.
They didn't lose that money. They didn't accidentally lose that money. They're just not willing to tell you where they put it.
Yeah, they embezzled it in black projects, obviously. But yeah,
and if you guys in the listening audience think that what we're talking about is trickery and bias, and you think it's just humans that are messing with other humans, if you think that's what it is, you can watch double-blind scientific surveys, sometimes involving innocent animals, not even human beings, doing these things. Like the last show that we talked about, where you said the island monkeys will start performing something they were never taught that you taught the monkeys on the mainland. Animals do these things, and they are not trying to impress you.
Yeah, this isn't
They're not
pseudoscience.
interested.
Yeah, this isn't fake news or pseudoscience. This isn't actual. These are actual studies, like you said, double blind, peer reviewed. Like this is the real. Something is happening here. And then, so I guess the question becomes, what can we do with this? Are there any limitations? And what kind of world could we be living in if we all started to actually maybe entertain this? And once we found out it was true, believe in it and do something about it. Maybe do some really incredible things on this planet.
Okay, so Joe McGonigal, Russell Targ, Ingo Swann, these gentlemen that were part of that CIA program, and several others. Their general consensus has always been from the beginning that you don't need a special ability.
Yep.
If you qualify as a human being, you have all the special abilities already necessary. If you can't do it, it's Paul Kamish's hiccups. You can't do it because you believe you can't do it, and that's the only reason.
Yep.
Because everyone can do it. And I would suggest a very simple exercise just to show you that you yourself can do this. All you have to do is have a friend of yours put a magazine in an envelope that is opaque and tell you nothing about it. Set it on your desk. Get your favorite pen and your favorite kind of paper and sit down and shut up and clear your mind and just pick a relatively low number that magazine is likely to have a page number for. You can even pinch it through the opaque envelope and say, oh, that's 120 pages. I'm going to pick page 105, and that's fine. And then sit down and clear your mind and don't guess. That's right. Don't guess. Don't imagine it. Don't even try, because you do not have the ability to see through paper. You just can't. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. But you can see what's on page 105. Now, for me personally, I get a series of silhouettes that interconnect, and then I get color, and then I get inner definition on whatever it is I'm viewing. Okay. But if I make that as a drawing, I end up with around 85% success rate doing exactly that experiment. I've done it with drunk people in public. On the spur of the moment, they had no training. They were still able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, all you need to know is like the local place and space that whatever it is you're trying to see exists. Whether that be
right, like you have to identify where it is. It's page 105, for instance, is an identifier.
That's all.
That's all you need.
Yeah, and what does that tell us about our brains, right? Because I used to do remote viewing, and I would have me and my godfather. We did it together. He one time invited his cousin over from, I believe, London, and we did a remote viewing on his neighborhood. And I, like you said, you don't try to guess anything. You sit there and you relax, and it comes to you. So I'm sitting there, and I get red brick house. Okay, that one's easy, right? Lots of red brick houses. But I see a red brick house, and then I see two very slender, like pine trees, right? So I'm like, there's two trees in the front, very pointy, right? So I'm starting to say this, and I can hear his cousin go, "Oh, how is it?" And then my godfather's like, shh, let him finish, right? So then I said, down the street, on the end of the street, there's a church, but it's like you have your two sides, and the church is on the end. And he flips out again, and my godfather's like, "Yeah, just let him keep going." So then I say, okay, there's a zoo, but it's not like a zoo. It's kind of like a farm, but it's not quite a farm either. It's something like a farm or a zoo or something in between. And he's like, holy shit, it's a petting zoo. And so so I was able to do all those things within a course of maybe 20 or 30 minutes. And like you said,
I wish I'd been more rude, because I just remote viewed the words petting zoo, and I didn't want to stop you.
You should have jumped. You should have jumped in. That would be even better.
For the audience, I should have been rude. I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone for not being rude. Okay, so I really recommend people just try this. And look, it's not about solving a puzzle. It's not. It's about letting some source of information tell you the answer to the puzzle. It's not about you solving it. If you try to solve it, you'll invent something and you will be wrong. You will.
Yeah.
I promise you, you'll be wrong. But if you can turn off your want to solve it and just let it be and let it come to you, and everyone's experience of how it comes. Some people get colors first. Some people get a complete picture, but it's only part of the whole picture, like you described.
Yeah.
Okay, so you saw a clear brick house at the beginning, but where were the dang trees? They weren't there yet.
Yeah.
But if you stood on the street and looked at the house, the trees would be in the way, but you didn't see them.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
so you can get it in chunks like that. I get it in like a fade to clear. Some people get it in colors and then definitions. And I mean, it happens different for everyone. Okay. Yeah. Which is fine. There's nothing, you still end up with good definition. And if you do this multiple times, and if you can defeat your own will to solve the problem, you can do this. I really recommend you try it. Now I want to talk about why I ended the last conversation the way that I did, so that when we got to this part of this conversation right now, I could say this.
Okay.
Where's the information coming from?
Okay. So here's my current theory, how far I've gotten so far. For instance, the magazine is a non-conscious object. So when you talk about transfer of information, it's between two conscious beings. Well, that's the thing, right? So on one level, if we're talking about it from that idea of God, yeah, it's God. And so I've had a lot of conversations on TART where I've spent 30 to 40 minutes trying to explain to them how I believe in God, what I mean by it, that I didn't shift to being a believer. I shifted my conceptual understanding of what God was, and it now fit into my already worldview about how the world exists. So when I think understood God in a deeper, more true way by, like you said, reading all the texts and then seeing the similarities across texts, this is what I realized. We are probably in God's brain. Right? Or we are probably a manifestation of a God mind. Interestingly enough, the same way our neurons look in our brain, the way they're structured, is the same way
outer space looks exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the same way galaxies are structured across the universe. And so what's happening is you and that book or that magazine in the opaque folder are intrinsically connected by the one thing that makes all things exist. And so you are actually, like I said before, Wi-Fi'd to that magazine. You and the magazine are actually one, in a sense, because you're all made of the same stuff. And that's not just some kind of googly goggly hipster new age thing like we're all one, man. No, we're literally all one thing. Gravity has an effect to every other thing. Like me, I have a gravitational pull on Sirius B, and Sirius B has a gravitational pull on me. That means there is literally a connection. You may not be able to see what the Buddhists called the subtle silk spider web that connects all things like diamonds. We may not be able to actually physically see that, but there is a tether. And on one level or one dimension or however you want to see it, there is like a string between me and Sirius B. There is like a string between me and every electron and atom of carbon on this computer. And so and on top of that, quantum physics is now showing that at the very basis of all things is information, not matter, not energy, not space, not time. Every little Planck length cube in the universe, when you actually try to measure it, you cannot measure it based on those four fundamental properties. You have to measure it based on the information that fits within the area, not the volume, which is another thing that the simulation theory makes very interesting. So what I'm saying is all this stuff is an entire bath of information, which we are interlinked to with the forces of the universe, like gravity. You are linked to that information at all times. All you have to do is understand where you're looking in time space. You don't have to physically be there. You just have to imagine, because your brain already knows all the answers. All the brain is a receiver. So that's why, like Richard said, don't go looking for it. You're already being given it all the time. All you have to do is open up and filter through the information, turn the right radio station, and you will get the information you're looking for. That's what I think.
I think parents and society in general teach the child to ignore it.
Yes, absolutely.
I think it's why children can say profound things that they don't have wisdom to say.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we all have seen that happen. And they're not getting it from their parents. Their parents didn't have to say something that profound, and the child is not repeating something they heard from you. That's not what's going on there.
Exactly. Okay. I liken like when you see a child born, when I see like a newborn baby, right? I think to myself, you are so much closer to God
than I am right now.
Than I have been in years. It's like I can't wait for that kid to start talking, because I know they're going to have these deep wisdoms that I forgot. Like, that's how I see kids. I see kids as like these jewels of information for what's really meaningful in the universe. I mean, think about school. Think about the fluoride in the infamil, the fluoride in the water, the high sugar content. Sugar acts like cocaine. We're being inundated with a bunch of bad stuff all the time. How could we even imagine what it's like to be an actual healthy human being?
Yeah, it's just a friend of mine. I'm saying I bring up everyone's at least first comment once.
Cool.
And if they say something super interesting or ask a question, I'll bring that up as well. And I brought that up just because it was the first comment by Brooke that I saw. Okay, so all right. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that the consciousness that we receive information from, sometimes called higher self, sometimes called meditation, sometimes called intuition, sometimes called serendipity, sometimes called luck, sometimes called prayer. Mm-hmm. Where is that consciousness located?
So I think it's, so how I see it is,
one of the biggest problems I have with Christians is them claiming there is such thing as an unembodied mind. I don't think that's possible.
I don't think so either. And I think it's just because they're seeing it wrong conceptually. So for instance, it's like, imagine if the universe is a brain, okay? If one of us starts to catch on to what's happening here, let's say, for instance, we are in God's dream. We'll use that metaphor. Our neuron will be firing a little stronger and be able to connect with more of that brain. So the information isn't coming. What people don't understand is, like, you think you're inside your body. You think that you're condensed in this thing, and you don't realize you're connected to everything, and that your idea of who you are, what you believe in, your name, your favorite color, all these things are just casual effects of being in the point in space and time that you are in as this humanoid person, right? Your identity as an individual person, this is my belief, your identity as an individual person is not real. Your fears of death are not your fears of actually physically dying. Your fears of death are you as a person with your own individual identity dying, because once you lay that to waste, you realize everything is all connected to the one thing. And while that's beautiful on one side, the idea that we're all one thing means that there's only one thing, and that one thing is alone. And so I think we try to escape that fear by condensing it into this person. So when we have this divine information come in from outside, like you're saying, like you're saying that they're saying, it's only through that layer of the ego and believing that we are disconnected from everything else and nature is mute and we're somehow incarnate into the universe and not a manifestation out of it. I think that's the principal difference between someone like a Christian and a Buddhist, is they think that they were sort of injected into the universal experience from outside of everything.
That is the problem, yes.
Yeah, where like a Buddhist belief or an alchemical belief, or what me and you were discussing, is you are an unfolding piece of the majesty of the universe, and you are always here, and you always will be here, and you just happen to be giving yourself this name and wearing Adidas clothing, and then built this character. But you're an apple on a tree. You've been the earth peoples, and you have been arisen out of that earth. You know, I think people have lost that sort of idea.
Okay, so this is one of the places where I'm going to disagree with you on a very, very, very specific point. I agree with the statement that information is ideas transferred between two conscious mind. I agree with the statement that a conscious mind has to have a physical brain. I agree that all information transferred is between two conscious minds that have brains, thereby bodies. Okay. And I mean that universally.
Okay.
So if I would ridicule myself and answer my own question, I would say that there are bodies that have consciousnesses in the universe, and all information held in the universe is held in those conscious beings. And there are conscious beings which are not me, which is how I can have information from outside of my experience. For instance, read a book.
Yeah, yeah.
Just as an example, simple example, read a book.
Right.
So if I receive information that is valid and falsifiable in reality, I try to falsify it, I find it true. It's from outside of my experience, I didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
That's evidence that there's someone not me.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Okay. But if I find information that is not privy to the whole planet, what does that mean?
You're definitely receiving it from a higher order.
I'm receiving it from a conscious being with a body from not this planet.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, well, my question becomes this, I guess, because I'm, you know me, I'm willing to flip sides at any moment, right? Because I try to keep the open mind about it. I guess my question becomes, because I've tried to work this out, right? I do think that there is I think there's a hierarchy of intelligent beings in our universe that would blow our mind. That's why we have the Book of Enoch, and they have all those layers of angels, and that's why the different angels have different sets: the seraphim, the Nephilim, the cherubim. I think those are all actual intelligent entities. So I agree with you completely that it could be getting received from a different kind of entity. So I guess the question becomes, like you've said before about the aunt and the mother, that highest order, that true one God, do you think that entity is, how do you think that entity is differentiated from like the jinn and the demons and the cherubim and the seraphim? What do you think about that? Because I guess that's my question I haven't answered myself either.
Okay, from what I can research, and I haven't researched enough, I never could. Let me say that first.
Yeah.
That's impossible.
Yeah.
I'm not going to live long enough to do that. I just won't be on this planet that long. So I want to put that disclaimer in there. But from what I can discern, what ancient spiritual texts are describing as God, the creator, which comes out of the navel and blooms of a lotus, or anyway, I'll get back to, okay, so I'm in a Christian country. I'm going to speak Christianese. Okay. Just so I'm not confusing people. In the Bible, it calls heaven the promised land. It's not a place on the Gaza Strip. You're never going to live there. Trust me. You're not natural born Israeli from that. You're not going to live there. Yeah. The land that you're being promised is called heaven. The Bible also says that as you enter the promised land, that's ascension into heaven, there will be those there who do not call me God. So in God's house are people not God's children. He doesn't even claim them. And they can't be lying, because one of the stipulations of living there is there are no liars. So they're actually not his children.
Interesting.
You see the logic there?
Yeah. Well,
perhaps they're attaches or politicians or seeking domicile, protection, something like this. But the one who calls himself my father says that's not one of his kids.
So you know about, because you said the navel, so that caught my eye or my ear immediately. So about the Dome of the Rock and the rock that sits on the dome and how on that place, and they say that possibly that's the opening of the infinite waters, and Jerusalem is allegedly the throne, and Solomon's throne is actually the throne that navigates between heaven, earth, and the lower realm. So is that what you were speaking of as far as the navel?
It's something I know a little bit about. It's not what I was trying to profess. Yes, I use some similar references. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I tend to agree with you that we are not dealing with what we imagine is the regular solar system. That there are, we're being, I think a lot of really important, powerful people also know that Earth is more of a realm that exists amongst multiple realms, some of which were documented in these religious. But I don't know. I've just started to get into these ideas. But so what's your theory then about these sorts of entities and their communication?
Oh, okay. Here's my theory on it. If I'm a grown-up and I've got a baby kid, say the kid's 3 years old.
Yeah.
As soon as the baby was born, I fenced in the backyard because I don't want wild animals eating my kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I fence in the backyard, and later I add blinds to the backyard. Okay. So I put a material block in so kids aren't just sitting there watching. People aren't watching my kid. Okay. And then beyond that, I'm going to go to all the 15-year-old, 13-year-old, 11-year-olds, all the way down to like 8-year-old. And I'm saying, look, you stay out of my freaking backyard.
Yeah.
That's my kid.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I think that's a responsible father.
That makes a lot of sense. And I never thought about that way. And I'm so glad we're talking about this specifically, because I just started getting into this idea of like Jerusalem being the navel of the earth, and that the earth is sort of produced out of it, and that there is these realms, so to speak. How we get from one to the other, I don't know. But that adds the
Fermi paradox and divine hiddenness, the false assumption in the Fermi paradox and divine hiddenness. I'll say it again.
Oh, you caught it. Okay, good.
I said the false assumption in the Fermi paradox and the question of divine hiddenness is that they're unintelligent and can't hide. That's stupid. If something could cross a galaxy, it can avoid you. It knows how.
Absolutely. So what is your feeling on things like UFOs, the gray alien thing, the abduction thing, their possible connection maybe to like the demons and stuff? Do you think this stuff is all connected? The Bigfoot stuff, the fairies?
I agree with you that all things are connected. I would also say that if I see a flying pink elephant, which I know does not exist in the biological world, that doesn't mean I didn't see it. And it doesn't mean that it's not real to me. And it doesn't mean that it's meaningless just because I saw something that doesn't physically exist.
Yeah.
When you look at it strictly, your eyeballs do not see, your ears do not hear, and your skin does not touch.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Those are things your brain does.
Well, they're saying even over the course of the last, let's say, 10 to 100,000 years, our eyes and our brains have chosen to selectively cut out things that we used to actually see in order to maintain a sort of survival, evolution, whatever. They're saying now that there could be things that are standing right in front of us that we used to be able to see that we no longer see, but we used to. Now you think back to things like fairies and all this other crazy stuff. It's like, what if because what if they were inconsequential to us over time because they were too psychologically distressing because they didn't make any sense to us? but because they didn't physically affect us, we evolved to not see them because it was better for that we didn't know that they were there. That would be a very logical explanation. And like you said, we don't see the actual universe. We see a 0.2% filtered product, and the 99.8% is not seen by us on the rest of the spectrum.
I'll give everyone an easy example. When was the last time you saw a flower? When was the last time you saw a purslane weed? When was the last time you noticed a weed? Not weeds generally, but a specific weed, like you notice flowers. When was the last time you did that? Okay.
I don't remember.
So we ignore things all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we have decided what's important and what isn't, and what we think important, we pay attention to.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to do that because I cannot sit here and look at everything ever, always, constantly in my environment. I can't look at everything always. I can't.
Yeah.
I'll never be able to concentrate on anything.
Yeah. And you think about things like the angels and the demons and Gog and Magog and the Nephilim and all these different things. You're like, and of course, a lot of the detractors want to just say that these are just fantastical stories of imaginative people. Our intelligence hasn't changed in 10,000 years. We are no smarter off the bat than we were 10,000 years ago. We're not dealing with morons back in the day. Do you understand what Rome and Greece did? You understand what Egypt did? These people weren't morons. They did things that we still can't do, and we still can't figure out how they did it. These weren't fools just telling random stories. There was something to what they were talking about, and there was something going on back then. I mean, I'm convinced personally.
Did you know that compared to the horizon, the aqueducts go uphill?
How?
They're so long that they had to consider the curvature of the earth.
Wow.
And they appear by sight to go uphill.
Yeah, that's insane.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And like, for instance, they discovered heliocentrism.
Yeah.
They just found out they discovered it 1,000 years before we rediscovered it. But a lot of those documents were lost at the Library of Alexandria during one of the fires. They figured it out, and it took us 1,000 years to refigure it out.
Find it out again. Yeah.
They already knew, right? And that's if that doesn't show you proof that there's more going on back then, I don't know what does.
And the point, Iger, was that people were smart, not that the earth isn't flat. That was not the point. Yeah. I'm just saying that was not the conversation. Okay. In fact, talking about telomere destruction and I would like to bring up deleterious mutations in intelligence and health of the human being. As society assigns more value to how unhealthy you are and you believe it, you become less healthy.
Yeah.
That's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
As we refine more chemicals and you consume more of them, you become more unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And depending on which, and I suggest NCBI for all your technical reading on biology, etc., on medicine. Depending on who you reference, each generation accumulates 60 to 100 more deleterious mutations than the generation before it had. That's right, bro. 60 to 100 more every generation. In fact, the most likely answer is we're getting sicker and dumber.
And for how long has this been happening, they're saying? How many generations?
The intelligence gap keeps growing between what is the least in our society and what is the greatest. Yeah. Because in order that you are not damaged in a certain way, and selective breeding has a lot to do with this, who people select. So that gap is getting larger and larger and larger, and it's more common to have a larger gap between the least intelligent and the most intelligent in our society. And that's just the way it works out.
Yeah. And so you have to ask yourself, look, we know it. I mean, a lot of us know it. I mean, come on, folks. Look at any of the news stations right now. Look at the late night TV shows. Watch a late night TV show 20 years ago and watch one now. Back then, it was like fun, engaging conversations. Like people were really like it was cultured, it was funny, it was deep. Now it's fart jokes. We're living in idiocracy. It actually happened.
I should have interrupted you again right there. Yeah, I was about to ask you if you'd watch the movie Idiocracy and recommend it to the general audience, because
my goodness,
man, it's where we're going if we ain't careful.
So if we're less intelligent by and large, right?
We have to be.
And we keep looking back at the historical texts. Let's say they're genius. Let's say they're just perfect works of art, which is kind of like what me and you pretty much argue, is that these things are so profound and they're so deep, but we have lost almost all ability to truly understand what they're saying, to the point that all we see is a goofy story because our minds have become goofy, right? Like our minds are unable to download this information. And I think you and I would both agree that there is so much depth to the Bible, to the Quran, to the Torah, to the Bhagavad Gita, you name it, right? There's so much depth that sometimes one sentence can mean three different things for three aspects of existence. Like we talk about you talk about the astronomical aspects of the text a lot, because you believe a lot of this has to do with that. And I absolutely agree. And I would take it a step further, that possibly in the same sentence that you see, yeah, seriously, man. A couple of things you'll have to watch the beginning, Monument, because we had mentioned a couple other things that we were discussing too. See, we're hyperlinked. But speaking of hyperlinked, the same sentence that can mean something astronomical can also mean something human and civilizational. I think they did that sometimes.
I'm gonna have to ask for a timeout. I'm gonna have to ask for a timeout. Iger, you're my brother, and I love you. Don't do this again. Do not do this again. We are not here preaching. We're talking about application in life. Okay? If you don't want to talk about application in life and how these ideas affect you in reality, then see yourself to some other conversation, sir. It's not that I don't love you. It's just not what this channel is. All right? Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, that's cool. But I'd like to also add a comment to that afterwards. I'll finish this real quick. So I think that the texts were so dense and so intelligent that like one paragraph can mean something about the astrological signs, while also meaning something about human psychology and how the astrological alignments affect human psychology, which also transcend into cultural norms in the society. Like you might be aware of this. During the age of Taurus was the same time that agriculture was coming to fruition in a big way, because they were using bulls to pull the plows, and they were also at the same time worshiping the golden calf. And so there was these multiple things happening. You have to ask yourself if there is some connection between the cosmos, how we think in our minds because of the effects of those natural forces, and how it affects society, and how deep these texts actually were. All they see is a ridiculous story about a golden calf. They do not get that they're talking about something way bigger that involves what we would consider now astrophysics, right? Astronomy, human psychology, sociology. All these things were written in there. But like you said, we're not smart enough to read the books our ancestors wrote, because they weren't on their phones.
I'll tell everyone a really obvious one once you think of it this way. I mean, just super obvious. There's no denying it, I think. Okay. And I can't remember which way is reversed. Would you please raise for me your left hand? Okay. All right. So a long time, but you can drop it now. Thanks. I just need an example. Okay. So a very long time, I wanted this facing correct for you, and tell me if it's backwards. A long time ago in the Bible, they worshiped golden calves. Okay. And then after that, they slaughtered sheep. Then after that, they fed with fish. And then the apostles ask how we get to the Last Supper. He says, go through the gate to the city, follow the man carrying a pitcher of water. Did you hear all that?
Yep.
That was Taurus, Aries, Pisces, and Aquarius in the correct order.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so the Bible is talking about eons of time and us traveling through them on this planet.
Yes.
And that is how the stars will be used for signs and seasons of days. page 2 of the Bible.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways he does that. Okay.
Yeah.
So if a Christian wants to say there is no value in astronomy, it never honored God, I'd take a second look. You might be biased.
Well, and another thing I think a lot of Christians, theists, atheists all forget is that the Bible is psychology, it's history, it's astronomy, it's so many things. And what you'll see a lot of people do when they modern interpret it, they think the Bible is just a way for you to fall in line. The things you have to do to live the life that gets you to heaven, where atheists see a bunch of fairy tale magical stories with no value whatsoever. If an atheist spent time and actually read the book, they would find so many philosophical principles, so many principles of morality. You would find Immanuel Kant in there. You would find Socrates in there, not the actual people there. You would find their ideas.
Things it's already there. Yes.
It's already there. Most of the stuff arises out of there, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the Bible motivated a lot of Greek thought. Obviously, Egyptian mythology and Egyptian beliefs did too. But tons of stuff in the Bible ended up inspiring a lot of these Greek philosophers. There's so much going on there.
Okay, so I'm gonna give the 10-minute warning to the side chat. If you want to pose a question, now's when you should write it. If you'll write my full name, Richard Madsen, in it, then I will find it more easily. I would appreciate that. Please be defined in your question. You've got 200 spaces. Use them, please. I hate guessing what someone meant. It's just a waste of your time. So don't waste your time. Write what you mean, please. And write it well. If it's worth writing, it's worth writing well, please. Okay, so I want to do this again.
Absolutely.
Not surprising.
Yeah. I was telling them in the Discord, I'm like, I hope this just becomes like a weekly series for a little bit. And I love the name you gave it too, Meeting in Eden.
Yeah. Perhaps if you would select a day and time that you typically have opportunity, that you're not already scheduled to do something, we'll start doing this on a regular basis. Okay.
I'd love to. Yeah.
I'm semi-retired. I have a lot of free time, like a lot. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I would say, I mean, even like if Friday is good for you, I enjoy this. I'm sort of like not really cool amongst the social crowd, so I don't go out on Friday nights. I kind of do my own thing anyway. So yeah, Friday would be fine for me.
Great. I don't go out either.
Yeah.
So that's great. We'll not go out together.
That there you go.
Awesome.
This will be where the party's at.
Yeah, I think these things are so fundamental and obvious once you look at them the right way that they're actually undeniable.
Yeah.
But it's not what religious people are describing. It's not popular religion. It's just the truth.
Yeah, and I think I tend to, you know how when people ask, like, when something wrong happens in politics or economy, most people will think that the person's just stupid, right? If there's a big mistake, I tend to lean toward that most of this is malevolent. I think the reason that most Christians these days judge things the wrong way is because the Catholic mafia have for 1,000 years trained and programmed people's brains to think that Jesus died for their sins because they're terrible and you can never be like Christ, because they didn't want a populace powerful to overthrow them because they love power too much, right? I think scientism, there's tons of malevolent characters in scientism that do not want you to understand the true nature of God and the true nature of your own divinity, because again, that would take power from the structures that uphold them, economy, politics, whatever it is. We're living in the matrix, in my opinion. It's not a metaphor. There's a system designed to level us down 10 steps because the dark prince does live amongst us. And this is
okay. So I want to say three things. I want to say three things real quick on everything you just said. It's a prophecy that the churches would become the synagogue of Satan. That's a prophecy in the Bible itself. Why do you think it's not your church it's referring to? I have no idea. Reconsider that.
Yep.
On Richard Dawkins' scientism, not science, he actually flew to Australia to see the vivisection, the dissection of a giraffe, so that he could see the world's longest left recurrent laryngeal nerve, which starts at the base of the head, goes all the way down under the aortic arch and up to the larynx. Now, does it control the larynx? Yes, it does. Does it control only the larynx? Surprise, no. It's not the laryngeal nerve, it's the esophageal nerve. It controls everything in that area, including swallowing. Now, swallowing is a peristaltic involuntary motion. You can't stop it once you start it. That's why people choke to death. If you put something in the back of your mouth and you push it back with your tongue, your throat will try to swallow it. But that series has to be fired in a certain order, and it's prescribed by the nerve endings. But all peristaltic wave functions, such as bowel emptying, stomach emptying, ejaculation, vaginal cleansing, are all peristaltic wave motions. And they're all wired backwards because they need to be in a specific order and they need to be fast. So when he said that God designed a poor recurrent laryngeal nerve, and that's a sign that evolution is true and God is stupid if God did it, and or trying to say there's no God, Richard Dawkins is stupid.
He's a fool. He's a smug fool.
It couldn't work otherwise. It wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to crap, reproduce, or swallow.
Yeah, and I love the smugness of Dawkins. He's something else.
Oh boy! By the way, I prayed about that. I didn't know what the recurrent laryngeal nerve. I heard him say it, and I thought, "Wow, that's a pretty good argument." What's the answer? And I prayed about it, and I received the words peristaltic wave, and I looked it up, and there's all kinds of them.
Oh wow! Okay, that adds even more context to it. See, and that's all you got to do is ask.
Yeah, well, I'm willing to admit when I don't know something, man.
Yeah.
You know, I'm willing to not try to invent an answer, but actually ask. I'm more than willing to do that. Dude, if you know, I'm asking you questions because you know things that I don't know because you're not me.
Yeah.
That's super interesting to me.
Yeah. Right back.
Oh, peace and respect and love to you, Beck.
So Monument had a question, right, about the God's brain and free will?
Yes, it was a statement that you said earlier. Guys, if you missed this original statement, you don't understand the context, please try to go back and catch the beginning of the show.
Says the main thing about pharaohs that you didn't. Wow. Yeah. So I think I think about this idea of God leaving, so to speak, right? Or like the high ones leaving. And I think there's, oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. And I think there's something to it. It's like the more of us that get tricked by the bad version, our brains start operating and emanating that way. We actually create those negative forces, which make this place unhospitable to things that come against that. So the more we're tricked, and I think that's the whole devil's wager thing. The more people that are tricked into thinking evil and stealing and lying and doing malevolent things, you create those fields and make this place inhospitable to the good. And that's why it is so important to connect with yourself, give God a chance, and really try to uphold what is actually good. You don't realize that this isn't just your game that you get to play in life and you get to win. It doesn't matter. All of your actions don't have impacts. They absolutely do have an impact, and in more ways than you could ever possibly imagine in this world and the invisible one. So as far as like, did you want to answer this? Oh, no, this is a question for me, right? Because I said
it's directly for you. I would comment when you're done.
Okay, so basically, Monument, I was taking it to the highest possible level I could imagine, but Richard was smartly because it's good for us to go in layers. He's talking about going in that hierarchy, like what is the next highest being and what is the next highest being. What I guess I try to do is push it to the very outsides of all possible things, because I do imagine that altogether one thing unites us all: this super consciousness. And this idea of the free will, it's very hard, right? Because you don't want to live in a deterministic world or life. You don't want to say that basically because the way the Big Bang happened or when God spoke the word, all the vectors, all the speeds, all the energy amounts were already predetermined and they've unfolded into the universe, and therefore you're inescaped to whatever karma you have. No one wants to live like that, because once you get deterministic, you get nihilistic. And you question your own purpose and your meaning. So I've wrestled with that because my logical brain wants to say, well, yeah, all the velocities and accelerations and amounts of matter were there at the beginning, and therefore da 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 da. But what I try to do with that is say, even if there is some unified consciousness with a plan, it wouldn't be very much fun if the game was already set and already decided upon. So if we're living in a conscious, we're living with as a conscious entity, God, I don't think God would make it so easy. And even at the end of the day, if we're living in a deterministic world, then I guess it gives us a really good excuse to just enjoy the ride. It's like when you're in theater, when you're on a stage, your character has to say certain things, but it's the experience you get to have with your character. You can put a little flair on things. You're going to have to say those lines to actually tell the story, but there's so much beauty and individuality you can add to that, and you are in the driver's seat, right? I can stop talking right now and be really uncomfortable the rest of the video, right? I do have that choice. So on that level, there is some determination. If this whole thing is being pulled at strings somewhere, I don't know. I can't control it. And at the end of the day, it doesn't quite affect me, right? That's how I try to see it, at least.
The journey of the hero expressed specifically for the Christian within the four Gospels. And the four Gospels are independent of each other in some facts. And even each refuting the other three. But that's because the character was left some amount of choice. In each of the four cases of the occurrence of a Christ. Chew on that, Christians.
Oh, okay.
As for me addressing this actual thing, my experience is when I am faced with some conundrum, question, challenge, I will reference a certain part of my brain. MRIs have shown that part of my brain has no memory. That part of my brain has no processing, but it will create a signal that I will process and I will consider it. That signal will contain options. I'll select from the options. I will find the option that agrees best with my morality, my sense of security, my sense of what the world around me is, consideration for others, and things like that. So what I am experiencing is a set of choices presented to me, which I exercise free won't onto. So I believe that what I'm experiencing is free won't. Now, I still have some amount of what to exercise, and that's dependent completely on me and what I believe is true. And that is how I influence my physical reality and people around me, et cetera, like this, like you were just saying.
Yeah. And to take it one step further, it's like, so how much of what Young might call the shadow, right, that is taking over your day-to-day life? It's like, if you're in traffic and someone pisses you off, but it's not a big deal, traffic's every day, but for some reason you get angry at this person directly in front of you, you're honking your horn, you're screaming and freaking out about it. There are so many subconscious things that are ruling your moment and ruling your day. But the more you can get back to realizing, like getting in their shoes, realizing you have an anger issue, setting all those things back, you can increase the amount of will you have over yourself. Whether or not we have absolute free will, I guess we don't have to even cross that road until we get there, because there's so many ways to impose a little more will into your everyday life. And that is in what we do at the Discord, doing the shadow work, seeking to understand the processes of the mind. But like that, it's like there's so many things you can choose to not do. And that's probably the first step, is finding out how many things you're doing that you barely have control over.
Yeah, I would say that when you start to exercise your mind over your brain, you will get addicted to it, man.
Yeah.
It's freaking awesome to be in that situation where you can honestly say, I am here and this is happening and I'm watching it happen. And I choose to be happy while it's happening to me. But it's not who I am.
Yeah. And I think
that's a big statement, man. It's not who I am.
Yeah, and I think that's the layer of consciousness that separates that's the one that really truly separates human beings from like chimpanzees, dolphins, and orcas, is that we can actually step back and not only be conscious, but then have that almost tertiary layer of observing ourselves as a conscious being. Like there can be the person, you can be having a conversation and at the same time be having a secondary observation of the conversation, like, oh, I just said that because I'm trying to get laid. Oh, I lied there, but I lied because I'm insecure about that thing. Or what, you know what I mean? Like you can sit there and do that. And that, like you said, that awareness that I'm not actually me, I'm projecting this player, right? And to have that layer of critique and see that is what, like you said, be in your mind, not your brain, or have mental control over your brain.
Right on. All right, so this one was directly for me. I'm sorry. You can feel free to say whatever you like. Ahead. I'm just going to go first. From my reading, I understand that a seraphim is a six-winged, non-living, beast-like thing that holds a high position in heaven. In the red star Kachina, it's the six feathered globes on the head of the red star Kachina. In Christianity, it's the four beasts around God's throne filled with eyes. That's eyes inside of them, not covered with eyes. So Michelangelo's an idiot, but I'm sorry, he just was. He put eyes on the outside of them before and behind. It says eyes inside. I looked it up. It's in interior pairs. Well, if I had a non-living thing with the faces of, and I'm just going to go through them real quick, and in this exacting order, the faces of a lion, a calf, a man, and an eagle. Did you notice that those are the four corners of the zodiac? Did you notice that?
Really?
Yeah, well, the eagle got replaced by Scorpio, but yeah, it's the four corners of the zodiac.
Oh,
it's Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, and Achaia.
Oh.
Yeah. What do you think of that? Okay.
So, you go ahead.
So the constellations are named after parts of heaven is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So is it providing directions? What do you think that verse is providing specifically? Not to get too tangential, but
next talk.
Next time, yeah. Okay, cool.
Next talk. That's going to be too big. Sorry.
Yeah. Because I got something I want to add, and I think it's going to be actually right along lines with that, and it has to do with the UFO phenomenon, entry of strange cosmic objects in and out of time space, like in an instant.
And you could answer this first. I would let you. I would encourage you.
What's life without surprises? Can your God be surprised? Christians. So the idea that God itself can be turned on, like it can be fooled, like it does. It is not is it omniscient?
Yeah, it would be omniscience.
Is that the kind of question? It's
God, a normal Christian claim, yes.
Okay, so that God can't be fooled. Well, so it really does depend, I guess, on. So, for instance, I sort of have this belief that Yahweh, for instance, wouldn't necessarily be the God, right? Yahweh might be a God on the totem pole, because I do think that this idea that the true one God is a God that can't be, his name can't be spoken, or he can't be described, he can't be looked upon, these types of things. Whenever I think that maybe the Christian God in the modern interpretation, they're not actually looking at the correct God. And so maybe that God could be surprised. I think there's been a lot, like Krishna, for instance. You have Krishna, that's a God, so to speak. Shiva, you have all these different characters. If any of these were actually entities that entered into Earth's, what do you call it? If there's a bunch of them, right, then a bunch of these gods are not the God. And I believe that those lesser gods could be fooled. The great God, it's like, it ends up being like, do you think that, what are the qualities of that God? Is that God the universe itself? In that case, it's purposely tricking itself because it's playing a hide and seek game with itself to entertain itself with its very existence. And so in that sense, the highest God, if the God is all things interconnected and we are God and God is we, then that God would want to trick itself. And that the Zen Buddhists believe that's the point, is God is trying to trick itself in its slumber to have a beautiful dream because when it's not dreaming, it realizes it's one, but it also realizes it's alone. And so it's a complicated question because it depends on what God you're talking about.
I would challenge you to think about this, Mark. All of us are connected. Yahweh, Brahma, Zeus, Odin would also all be connected.
So do you think basically Yahweh and Zeus and Odin, all those are definitely the Father, like highest order of God that there is? There is no God higher than that. Do you think they all
well, it
come
depends
across?
on your definition of God. I think the most accurate definition that I can subscribe to in reality is the Christian definition of God. And that God is a set of 7 perfect ideals. Not a singular physical being, a set of perfect ideals for what the human animal is.
Yeah, see, so I'm with you. Well, I lean more toward that.
But that only qualifies for if you're a human.
That makes sense too, because like we said before about information, right? It's like information isn't information until it's in the context
until some
of
consciousness sees it,
yes, exactly,
or speaks it, or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think what these religions are describing is that for us human beings, there's one God, and I think that's true because we are all the same kind of animal. We don't have a choice about it.
Okay.
For instance, breathing water is evil for humans, really good for fish.
Ah. So how do you think the God, like, so, I'm liking this idea. But my question, I guess, for you is then how is the God manifesting in the
next
universe?
Question is, how many of us accept that we are human beings, agree upon the ideal system, employ it in every moment life, making a coherent body of individuals working toward the goal that is what is best for human being?
How many?
And that collective exercise God.
So is God manifesting off of our philosophical?
Yes, in you and me, and yes.
My man.
If you choose.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
But you must agree and you must choose.
Yes. Well, I mean, so have you heard of the archons in Greek mythology?
I've heard the word, I have no reference.
So it's sort of along the same lines as that when you think a thought, you create a hyperdimensional object. The more people thinking that same thought and connectively like praying, when 2 or more pray, I am there. Okay, yes, yeah.
We built the airplane and we built the nuclear missile this way.
Yes. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So
man. Yeah. You've articulated it so well, and that's the kind of thing. Like, so this is how I thought of it. I believe that God is a God we create, and I just made the assumption that Brahma is higher, but at the same time, because we've been talking about these conversations and we've taken a step back from this material perspective of reality, and more of this idea that we are actually mentally projecting this as a realm. Those two things would be one and the same.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And if you think about Islam, like when they do their prayers, they say, God, most merciful, most beautiful, most strong, most wise. You're saying those things because you're reiterating those ideas because you're
making it true. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, man. I'm with you. I'm totally with you, man.
Now, the question is, how long have humans been participating in God and how many of them are there? And at what levels are they because of their experience of participating God? Yeah.
And how many different gods, and what's like the adoption rate, or like the rate at like which when they have a certain percentage doing a certain thing, it actually takes off. Is that what you're trying to suggest? Like you need a certain amount to get a certain
I'm trying to tell you, Mark, that everything that we're talking about here, we are the island monkeys exhibiting that new behavior. That's what we are.
I wish I could high five you right now. Dude, yeah, you got me thinking now. I'll be
We're
thinking
the
about
new
this all night
babies.
now.
We're that little tiny batch.
The Ubermensch. We're the bridge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
man.
you go.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I believe that God knows any and every possibility, and we free will, uh, while we're still unable to change the prophecies, God can be surprised by a choice, but God knew all the all the options. Yeah. So with this new idea, though, of us actually at the same, when we think the idea of God, we've actually created this hyperdimensional object of God, and then when many people are thinking it all together, God can only be surprised
if all of us are surprised.
Yes, yeah. So
Now we can be surprised right now in our ignorance on this earth. Sure.
yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. So Anna, when we talk about spirit guides and getting these people, getting like entities coming to dreams, and I always tell everyone, it's consider the possibility that you have manifested these ideas with your own thoughts, right? Like Christians often see Jesus and angels come to them in dreams, and people that are like ufologists often see the reptilians or the Arcturians come to the dream. This will, what basically Richard and I are kind of like talking about for the first time now. We haven't discussed this too much in the Discord. What if even that highest God is still the same thing, where it's our thoughts creating that God, because enough of us believe in it, it has become that highest God. And that's really compelling, Richard. I mean, like I said, I'd always put a higher order of God above that, like the infinite potential of the universe, which we channel to create these other gods. But
I think this is the natural order of things. If you have a child, before that child reckons other adults and other parts of society and starts to value the larger picture, you are that child's God because you are its father. Sorry, that's how it works in reality.
Yeah. And
that's just the truth of what we are.
Yeah, and like when you
could say that we're the God makers, but you could say there's no choice on what God we make.
Do you think there is a choice on what God we make?
No, I think it's based on what we are.
You are like, I know I watched something. You're like bringing back a memory of something. Like I started watching a video on about this kind of thing. Like, God, is there a name for this, or is this something completely novel?
I have no idea. To me, it's novel. That's all I know.
Yeah, like I remember getting an edge of this where it was like this. Terrence McKenna might have discussed things, or he wasn't the same thing we're talking about, but he had this sort of idea that our God is a God of culture, right? Like it's always been a God of culture that we manifest out of our own biological, like predestined, like you're saying, like the nature of who we are manifests a God through culture, but it's based on our sexual drive, the way our neocortex is formulated in our brain and all that. Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
Well, yes, but I'm trying to be more defined than that. I believe it's more defined than that.
Yeah.
That I think that right now on this earth, if we were the only humans anywhere in the universe, and we scientifically mapped exactly what a human being is, and no, we're not even close.
Yeah.
We would all agree on God.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Now,
it's a necessity of what the human animal is, not opinions.
So do you think that what we're crossing to, possibly even in the age of Aquarius, is having a conscious control over how we manifest that God in reality?
The reason that the Aquarius is the age of enlightenment is because it's the age of interference by our ancient ancestors who live today and are human beings, rescuing us from ourselves. Dude, look at this planet. How long do you think this can go on like this?
6 months.
6 months. Well, that might be a little short, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Earth collapsed in 6. I wouldn't be shocked.
Well, I mean, we have a mind virus right now that is eating big cities alive. For instance, in America, China's putting the Uyghurs in concentration camps right now in front of everyone. Armenia is in outright conflict right now. Turkey launched missiles today. And there is a psyop, a global psyop, to get us to eat each other in the streets. And I'm surprised people have had so much.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm a bit pessimistic about it. I don't think of like it being a nuclear war. I don't think that we're going to have that. I think we're going to rip each other to shreds and die from malnutrition. And I think it's going to happen way quicker than people. But yeah, 6 months is a bit dramatic, I think.
Yeah. But I see your point just the same.
Yeah.
All right. So the people have stopped asking questions. We've gone almost 2 hours.
It's great, man.
How'd that happen? Yeah, we were wrapping it up at 1 hour. And we're almost
you're right.
2. I'm serious. We wrapped it up for an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mark, we'll talk off air and figure out something if we can get this to a regular basis sort of thing and see if that happens, see if that's in our cards. And thank you again so very much. I want to tell you repeatedly because people say things casually. I really appreciate you. I believe we're all brothers and sisters. Thank you for being a brother that's willing to participate in some thoughts that aren't easy. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Rich, I appreciate you. And you have no idea how much we all talk about you in the Discord. And see you as a very wise person, very open. And we're super excited about this happening more often because, like you said, I'm willing to have the conversation. So are you. And it's very hard to take things this far and to have this expansive kind of conversation. So it's a blessing to be able to talk to you too.
St. Tommy, I want to address you directly. I'm not doing this channel for preaching. Okay. I'm doing this channel for deep discussions that are serious about things that affect us in life and how we can ourselves learn to know God. Okay. Please do not do this again. That's not what this channel is for. I'm sure there's channels that love this sort of thing. You're my brother. I love you. I have respect for you. Please don't do this here. Okay.
Can I say one thing to these types of comments?
Yes.
So you're convinced of your belief that this is how it went down. We are convinced that's how it didn't go down. Right. And so it's one thing for you to open a discussion where we kind of test each other's theories, have conversations. But to be honest, to give you guys a kind of a harsh criticism, what I often see with people who believe very much that Jesus died for our sins, rose the third day, and that's all there is to it. There's no hidden meaning behind that. There's no instruction. I see them talking at me a lot. I see them talking at people a lot, but never carrying on a conversation, wanting to do a podcast, wanting to have a longer conversation. I see a lot of it is just, you need to repent. You need to understand this. God, forgive me for even accidentally stumbling in the comments. Like I invite anybody to have an actual conversation. What I don't see as progressive is just talking at us, telling us to calm down like you just did, or telling us to repent. It's like we've already abandoned that fear that we're going to be sent to hell because we're talking about ideas. I'm not afraid of that. If I live in a universe where I would be thrown in hell because I'm questioning the official narrative of the Vatican Mafia, then that's a universe I would be glad to rebel against, because that's not a kind God.
And by the way, a petty, prejudiced God.
Who would want to worship a God?
I don't know why you would worship a petty, prejudiced God. I have no idea why you would.
It makes
no sense.
Yeah.
And by the way, if your God didn't tell everyone the truth around the whole planet, which he claims he did, and he claims to be God over the whole planet, then you must be misjudging him to say that he only invented one religion.
Yeah. Is there Bibles on every indigenous island that were just uncovered in the same? It didn't happen. There's tons of people that have never known what Christianity is, don't know who Jesus Christ is. And that's pretty easily improvable. They have their own stories. They have a lot of similarities. They have a lot of similarities, which gives more credence to what Richard and I are saying, is that these things are divinely inside of us all the time. And it's not a particular religion. It's not a particular type of God that has, these views of like, these types of people are bad and you'll go to hell if this person doesn't die for you. A lot of people don't have those specifics of the story. You have to start asking yourself a question. Like he said, if God is protecting all of his children, why did some people get the good rap and the other ones got nothing out of it. They had to
left
figure it
out
out
in the cold. How's that for a just God?
Yeah.
How's that for benevolence? You like that?
Yeah, it's not a benevolent God. And that's what, like, what Richard and I were just saying at the end of this is, we are responsible for the God we produce. Why would you make a God that was mean? Like, that says more about the people that believe in it than it does the God. You guys manifested those ideas of self-punishment. There's something, and that's the secret that the Vatican has. If they can control this narrative of self-depreciation, of repression of the self, of oppression of the self, not believing that you're worthy, that you're a filthy rag.
Let's be reasonable, Mark. If you want to govern people, you need people who are dependent on you.
Yeah, and hate themselves and think they can't do it by themselves. Exactly.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
and all governments have to do this. And all governments who do not do this, but make independence and skepticism and education, find themselves out of a job.
Yeah. Irrelevant, because everyone becomes their own leader.
You know, as you are a miniature society, as a household, what you're trying to do is become not the leader. Yes. What you're trying to do is make your children into functional adults who do not depend on you.
Absolutely.
That's a microcosm of how government works.
Yeah.
Okay.
The greatest
and why it doesn't work.
Yeah. The greatest teacher is one where the student begins to outperform them. And the quicker that happens, the better teacher you are.
Amen. Which means you can't have a government that teaches. All right, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk off the air, and we're going to try to get this down to, maybe we'll do this once a week thing, or once every couple week thing. We'll see what happens. I'd love to do it every 3 days, but I that's not reasonable for me to ask. It's reasonable of my schedule, but reasonable of almost no one else's.
Well, I don't see why we couldn't do 2. Like, when I have the time, I would love to do 2 a week. So I'll let you know about my schedule, but at least once a week, I'd love to do this.
Okay, let's figure something out.
So I don't
think any God demands worship.
Yeah, and that's it's about the context of how you might see a God. It's like this God of worship, for instance, right? That's more of an Abrahamic and modern Abrahamic interpretation of God, is a God that requires worship from its subject. Where, like, when we're talking about God here, it's like, remember, we're redefining what it means to be a God, because we're seeking the highest possible principles of what it means to be an incredible human being, and then manifesting that together as this divine object. And so, of course,
next time we talk, we're going to do sacrifices.
Oh man, I've got a lot to say about sacrifices.
Good. Yeah. We'll do a show on sacrifices. Yeah. That'd be great.
That sounds terrifying, right? Like,
no, it's wonderful. It's amazing.
People. Yeah.
All right. Show yourself, Mark. Talk a little bit about the program that you're trying to help people grow themselves.
Okay, so on our Discord is sort of the way we start the chat on it. But I have this sort of, out of the theory and thesis that Richard and I have been talking about, I've asked myself, what practical things would a person have to do to get to the place that I envision in my head, that Richard is talking about, with creating this beautiful God for the future that works for all people. What we do at our Discord, what we do at the school, is try to create a practical, like, everyday, understandable by all human beings process to get you there, right? So it's less about me teaching anything and more about me just unlocking you for what you were always supposed to be. So we do a lot of, like, therapy work. I'm in New York, so I can legally provide basic therapy. This isn't like crazy psychoanalytical stuff. This is going to mess you up. It's just regular therapy, journal, dream analysis, talking out your problems, and then teaching you how to work with those energies of the body and get yourself back to normal state, get yourself back to a healthy state. And all of this will come naturally for you. So what we do is we kind of unlock you back to the normal you. You can find me on Mark of Legend on TikTok. In the link tree in the bio, you can get to everything else.
Which, last time we did a show, you said you were going to email me those links and stuff, and then I lost it, or I erased it, or you didn't do it, or something.
I didn't do it.
Okay. All right.
As soon as we get
be
off,
sure to. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right, guys. That's the end of this episode. I hope we have more episodes. If the stars all align for us, I guess I could say it that way.
Yeah.
I want you all to know that I truly look forward to the day that we're all great friends.
Yeah.
Peace and respect to you all.
Peace and respect to you, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.